At my 45th wedding anniversary party, my wife stood on stage, announced she was divorcing me, and called me a parasite. My children cheered and applauded under the gaze of 200 guests. I felt betrayed, humiliated, but I stayed calm. I picked up the pen and signed the divorce papers without saying a word. Then I leaned in close and whispered, "Congratulations." The moment I finished signing, "Your luxury life ends." They laughed. They thought I was joking. By sunrise, they would learn I had destroyed them with just one signature. I'm so grateful you're here. Before we begin, where are you watching from? And how did you find this channel? Through a recommendation, a search, or just scrolling? Drop a comment below. If this resonates with you, subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear this. Quick note: this story contains fictional elements for educational purposes. Any similarities to actual people or places are coincidental, but the lessons here are meaningful. I am Robert Mitchell Harrison. I am 67 years old, and for the last 4 decades, I built a financial empire worth $47 million from nothing but grit, sleepless nights, and a refusal to settle for mediocre. I clawed my way up from a state school MBA to chief financial officer of a Fortune 500 logistics company. I retired 2 years ago with my reputation intact and my portfolio diversified across 3 trusts, 2 real estate holdings, and a stock portfolio that made my competitors curse under their breath. But tonight, standing at the back of the Sterling Grand Ballroom in Greenwich, Connecticut, watching 200 guests in black tie attire sip champagne that cost more per bottle than most people spend on a car payment, I am not here as a titan of industry. I am here as a husband about to lose everything, or at least, that is what they think. The ballroom was all marble columns and chandeliers dripping crystal, the kind of old money elegance that whispers rather than shouts. The air smelled like lilies and expensive perfume. A jazz quartet played something soft and forgettable in the corner. Waiters glided between tables, carrying trays of hors d'oeuvres I could not name, but certainly paid for. 45 years ago, Diana and I stood in a courthouse in New Haven and promised each other forever. Tonight, she was about to rewrite that contract in front of everyone we knew. She was at the microphone now, my wife of 45 years, 64 years old, and still beautiful in the way that money and meticulous maintenance can preserve. Her dress was silver, shimmering under the lights, and probably cost 5 figures. Her hair was swept up, diamonds at her throat and wrists, the same ones I bought her for our 30th anniversary. She was smiling, and the crowd quieted, expecting a toast. Some sentimental reflection on nearly half a century together. I knew better. I had known for 6 months, ever since I overheard a phone call she thought was private. A conversation with her country club friends about how one of them just divorced her husband and walked away with half of everything. Diana did not know I was standing outside the bedroom door that night. She did not know I started making calls the very next morning. Her voice cut through the murmur of conversation, confident and rehearsed. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she began, her smile widening as she gripped the microphone stand like she was anchoring herself. 45 years is a long time, long enough to raise 2 wonderful children, long enough to build a life most people only dream of. But it is also long enough to realize when something has run its course. The room went still, someone's fork clinked against china, then absolute silence. I saw heads turning, confusion rippling through the crowd like a stone dropped in water. Diana did not falter. She lifted her chin and kept going. "I have sacrificed a great deal for this marriage," she said, and her voice caught just enough to sound sincere. "I gave up my career in architecture to raise Marcus and Vanessa. I gave up my dreams so Robert could chase his, and for 45 years I stood beside him, smiled at his colleagues, hosted his dinners, played the role of the perfect wife. But tonight I am done playing." She reached into a small silver clutch and pulled out an envelope. My chest tightened, not with fear, but with something colder. Anticipation. She opened it with deliberate slowness, and I watched 200 faces lean forward, hungry for scandal. "These," she announced, holding up a stack of papers, "are divorce papers. And I am filing them tonight in front of all of you, because I want the world to know that I am reclaiming my life." The ballroom erupted, gasps, whispers. Someone near the front laughed nervously. I did not move. I just watched as she handed the microphone to someone else and stepped off the small stage, walking toward me with the papers outstretched like a weapon. The crowd parted for her, and I could see Marcus and Vanessa at their table near the front, both of them grinning, like they had just won the lottery. My son, 34 years old, who had never held a job longer than 6 months. My daughter, 31, who built a career out of posting pictures of herself online and calling it entrepreneurship. They were already counting their inheritance. Diana stopped in front of me, and the room held its breath. She did not say anything, she just placed the papers in my hand. I looked down at them, then at her. Her eyes were bright, triumphant. She thought she had won. Behind her, Richard Ashford stepped forward. He was my former business partner, 59 years old, and wearing a suit that probably cost more than his integrity. He was smiling too, that smug, self-satisfied expression of a man who thinks he has traded up. I remembered the day I fired him for skimming funds from a client account. Apparently, he had moved on to skimming my wife. I pulled the Mont Blanc pen from my jacket pocket, the one Diana gave me this morning as an anniversary gift. 45 years, and she still did not understand irony. I uncapped it slowly, and the click echoed in the silence. I flipped to the signature page, and I signed my name in smooth, deliberate strokes. Robert Mitchell Harrison. The ink dried before anyone breathed again. I leaned in close enough that only she could hear me, and I whispered, "Congratulations, Diana. You just triggered your own extinction event. Enjoy these last 5 minutes as a wealthy woman. The countdown has already begun." She blinked, confusion flickering across her face, but I was already stepping back. I reached into my other pocket and pulled out my wallet, my car keys, my American Express black card. I handed them to Marcus, who had appeared at my elbow like a vulture circling carrion. His hand closed around them greedily. "Thanks, Dad," he said, and there was no warmth in it, just entitlement wrapped in a smirk. I nodded once and turned toward the exit. The crowd was buzzing now, voices rising, cameras flashing. Someone was recording this on their phone, and by morning it would be all over social media. I made it 3 steps before Marcus blocked my path, his hand on my shoulder. "Wait," he said, his voice loud enough for people nearby to hear. "What about the rest? The house keys, the account numbers?" I looked at him for a long moment. This boy I raised, this man I tried to teach, and I smiled. Not warm, not forgiving, just certain. "You will get exactly what you deserve," I told him. And I walked out into the cool Connecticut night, leaving behind the wreckage of 45 years and the beginning of something they would never see coming. The air outside hit me like cold water, sharp and clean after the stifling ballroom. Rain fell steadily, turning the parking lot into a slick mirror of headlights. I heard footsteps behind me, Marcus, breathing hard, his dress shoes skidding on the wet pavement. "Dad, wait." His hand shot out. "Your wallet. You forgot your wallet." I stopped and turned. He was 34, and should have learned by now that nothing in life is free. I reached into my jacket, pulled out the leather billfold Diana gave me last Christmas, and placed it in his palm. "Consider it your inheritance," I said flatly. "You will need every dollar." I was already walking toward the black Lincoln Town car idling near the lot's edge. Samuel Miller was behind the wheel, 72 years old, and as sharp as the day I met him 30 years ago. He leaned over and pushed the passenger door open. I slid in, and the door shut with a solid thunk, cutting off the rain and the distant voices. Samuel shifted into drive without a word. The windshield wipers beat steadily, the dashboard glowing a soft blue. We were halfway to the highway before he spoke. "That went about as expected," Samuel said, his voice low and measured. "Better," I replied. "She played it exactly like we thought. Public humiliation. Richard standing there like a prize. She handed me everything I needed." Samuel reached into the center console, pulling out a slim iPad. He handed it to me without taking his eyes off the road. I powered it on. The screen showed a dashboard I designed 6 months ago with Samuel's help and a forensic accountant who owed me a favor. "It is a scorched earth protocol," Samuel said. "Are you sure you want to activate tonight?" At the top, a countdown timer read 13 minutes. Below it, 3 categories: credit, vehicles, property. Each showed green. In 13 minutes, they would all turn red. "Explain it to me one more time," I said. Samuel merged onto Interstate 95, heading south toward Manhattan. The rain drummed against the roof. "Everything they think they own, the Greenwich House. The cars, the credit cards, the bank accounts. It is all held in the Harrison Legacy Preservation Trust. You established it 19 years ago. You are the sole trustee. Diana, Marcus, and Vanessa are beneficiary. But their access is governed by the trust's terms." I nodded, my eyes scanning the screen, "And those terms state that each beneficiary gets $85.00 annually for reasonable living expenses. Anything above that, is classified as an unsecured personal loan from the trust, subject to 8% annual interest compounded quarterly. The ledger tracks every transaction, every swipe, every mortgage payment, every country club fee. It is all logged. I scrolled through the iPad. 12 years of expenses. Diana's spending alone totaled over $4 million. Marcus had burned through nearly $2 million on failed ventures and leased luxury cars. Vanessa's content creation career had cost just over $1 million. Combined, they had exceeded their allocation by more than $4 million. Add the interest, and the debt climbed to $6–8 million, and they have no idea, I said quietly. None, Samuel confirmed. Every statement was mailed to Greenwich. Diana never opened them. She just filed them away. Marcus and Vanessa never asked to see a single one. The timer ticked down to 11 minutes. I tapped the categories, expanding each one. At midnight, every credit card linked to the trust will be deactivated. At 7 in the morning, repo companies will reclaim the vehicles. At 6 in the morning, the sheriff will serve an eviction notice at the Greenwich house. 48 hours to vacate, all legal, airtight, and irreversible. What about Richard? Samuel asked. He is not in the trust, not my problem. But he called you this afternoon asking if Diana has any assets in her name. Did he not? Samuel's mouth twitched into something close to a smile. He did. I told him the truth. 0. He hung up quickly. I looked at the screen again. 9 minutes. My thumb hovered over the button at the bottom. A simple blue rectangle with the word Activate in white capitals. One tap, and 45 years of enabling, of hoping they would figure it out, all of it would end. I pressed it, the screen flashed, the categories turned red. Somewhere in a New Jersey server farm, automated processes were starting. Notifications queuing, repossession orders dispatching, legal notices printing. Samuel glanced at the screen, then back to the road. No going back now, there never was, I said. We drove in silence through the rain, city lights growing brighter as we approached Manhattan. Samuel took the exit for the Upper East Side, navigating narrow streets until we pulled up in front of Harbor Tower Residences, a gleaming glass high-rise. I bought the penthouse on the 78th floor 2 years ago, paid cash, and kept it off every record Diana might have seen. It was mine, fully, completely, unquestionably mine. I stepped out into the rain, and Samuel rolled down the window. Call me if you need anything, he said. I won't, I replied, but I meant it kindly. Go home, Samuel. Get some sleep. Tomorrow is going to be a long day for them. He nodded and pulled away, his taillights disappearing into the rain. I walked through the lobby past a doorman who nodded without asking questions and stepped into a private elevator requiring a key card. The doors closed. I watched the floor numbers climb, 76, 77, 78. The doors opened into a foyer leading directly into my apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, rain streaking the glass like tears. I checked my watch. 11:51 p.m., 9 minutes until midnight. The first light of dawn filtered through the penthouse windows, painting Manhattan in pale gold and gray. I sat at the kitchen island with black coffee and my laptop open. The clock read 6:47 a.m. I had not slept, not because I could not, but because I did not want to miss this. The laptop displayed a grid of camera feeds, showing different angles of the Greenwich estate. I installed the security system 5 years ago, top-of-the-line equipment with cloud storage. Diana never paid attention to it. She thought it was just another expense she did not have to think about. I rewound the footage to 6:15 a.m. and pressed play. The first tow truck arrived as the sun broke over the tree line, a massive flatbed with yellow lights flashing. It backed into the circular driveway with precision. The driver stepped out, checked a clipboard, and walked to the front door. Marcus opened it in a bathrobe, his hair sticking up, confusion written across his face. The driver pointed to the Mercedes S-Class, Diana's car, the one she insisted on leasing new every 3 years. Marcus gestured wildly, probably yelling, but the driver just shook his head and walked back to the truck. Within 10 minutes, the Mercedes was loaded, secured with chains, and gone. Marcus was still standing in the driveway, his phone pressed to his ear, when the second truck arrived. This one took the BMW X5, Marcus's car. The driver did not bother knocking. By the time the third truck arrived for Vanessa's Audi Q7, Diana was outside too. She was still wearing her silver dress from last night, standing barefoot on the gravel, screaming at a driver who looked like he would rather be anywhere else. I zoomed in on her face. She was crying, mascara streaking down her cheeks, and for a moment, something in my chest tightened. Then I remembered the microphone, the papers, Richard standing there like he had won a prize. And the feeling passed. The driver said something, and I knew what it was because Samuel had scripted it. Trust-owned vehicles, trustee revoked access. Diana kept screaming even as the truck pulled away, then stormed back into the house, slamming the door hard enough that I could see the frame shake. I fast-forwarded to 8:30 a.m. A white catering van pulled in, and a man in a chef's coat stepped out carrying a tablet. Marcus answered, still in the bathrobe, looking like he had aged 5 years overnight. The chef showed him the invoice for last night's anniversary event. $8, $200. Marcus nodded and pulled out the American Express black card I gave him last night. He swiped it. The chef waited, swiped again. Nothing. The screen flashed red, declined. Account closed. Marcus's face went from confusion to panic to anger in 3 seconds. He started yelling, pointing at the chef like this was somehow his fault. Diana appeared, still wearing the silver dress, and took the tablet. She tried her own card, declined. She tried another, declined. The chef said something, probably a threat about legal action, and Diana's face crumpled. Marcus was shouting now, "My father will pay for this. My father will fix this. No, I won't." The chef left, shaking his head. Diana and Marcus stood frozen in the doorway. Vanessa appeared behind them, and the three of them just stared at each other. At 10:15 a.m., a sheriff's cruiser pulled in. Sheriff Thomas stepped out, walked to the door, and when Marcus opened it, handed over a document. I could see Marcus reading it, his lips moving, then looking up at the sheriff like he was waiting for a punchline. The sheriff pointed to a line on the paper and walked back to his car. He did not speed away. He just drove off like this was routine. Diana grabbed the paper from Marcus and read it herself. 48-hour eviction notice. Property owned by Harrison Legacy Preservation Trust. Occupants must vacate by Tuesday, 10:15 a.m. She crumpled the paper, threw it on the ground, and stormed inside. Marcus picked it up, smoothed it out, and read it again. 10 minutes later, Diana was on the phone. I did not need audio to know who she was calling. Samuel. He would answer on the third ring and tell her exactly what I told him to say. The house is owned by the trust. I am the trustee. I have exercised my right to terminate their occupancy. All legal, all documented, all irreversible. I watched as Diana's face went pale, her mouth moving silently, and then she hung up. She sat down on the front steps, still barefoot, still in the silver dress, and buried her face in her hands. By 2 in the afternoon, they were loading suitcases into Kyle's Honda Accord. Kyle was Vanessa's husband, and his car was the only one left because it was in his name, not theirs. Vanessa was crying. Marcus looked furious. He looked like he had been hit by a truck. Diana looked like she had aged 10 years since yesterday. They piled into the car, 5 people crammed into a sedan meant for 4, and Kyle drove away. I pulled up the address Samuel sent me. Riverview Motor Lodge, 447 Boston Post Road, $52 a night. 2 rooms, thin walls, a lingering smell of bleach and desperation. 1.5 stars. Complaints about noise, mold, and a vending machine that eats your money. I closed the laptop and picked up my phone. There was a text from Samuel. "She is trying to call Richard. Thought you would want to know." I opened a separate app tracking phone activity on lines I still paid for. Diana's number, outgoing call to Richard Ashford. Duration 42 seconds. I played the recording Samuel's investigator sent over. Diana's voice was shaking. "Richard, I need you, please. Everything is falling apart." "Robert, Richard's voice was smooth and detached. "Diana, this isn't a good time." Background noise, a woman laughing. Not Diana, someone younger. Diana was desperate now. "Richard, please, I can't." The line went dead. I set the phone down and finished my coffee. The city outside was waking up. Taxis honking, sirens wailing, the hum of 8 million people starting their Sunday. I typed a single note into my phone. She just lost her last lifeline. The penthouse was quiet except for the hum of the city below, a distant symphony that never quite stops. I was sitting in the leather armchair by the window, the one Diana would have hated, because I picked it out without asking her opinion. There was a glass of whiskey in my hand, neat, burning, going down. On the coffee table, a photo album lay open, its pages yellowed, the plastic sleeves cracked with age. Our wedding album, 1980, 45 years ago. I turned the pages slowly, and the faces staring back at me were younger, softer, full of something I could not quite name anymore. Hope, maybe, or ignorance. Diana was in a simple white dress, no train, no veil, just her and a bouquet of daisies she picked up at a corner shop. I was in a borrowed suit because I could not afford to buy one. We got married at a courthouse in New Haven. No guests, no reception, Just the two of us, and a justice of the peace who looked like he would rather be anywhere else. Afterward, we got pizzas and walked around the harbor until sunset. She told me she was going to design buildings that would last 100 years. I told her I was going to build a fortune that would last longer. I closed my eyes, and I was back there a year earlier. 1979, a charity gala at the Yale Art Gallery. I was 21, halfway through my MBA, surviving on coffee and ambition. She was 18, a freshman studying architecture, wearing a borrowed dress and holding champagne she was not old enough to drink legally. She laughed at something her friend said, and the sound cut through the noise like a bell. I walked over, introduced myself, and she looked at me like I was the most interesting person she had ever met. We spent 3 hours talking that night about brutalism versus Art Deco, about whether money corrupted ambition or fueled it. I thought I had found a partner who understood ambition. Someone who would not resent the long hours or the sacrifices that came with building something from nothing. I was wrong. We got married the next year, and for a while it worked. She graduated, got a job at a small firm in Hartford, and spent evenings sketching designs she would never get to build. I worked my way up from the bottom. We had a one-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood that was not quite safe, and we were happy, or at least I thought we were. Then Marcus was born. 1985, she was 24. I was 27. One night she sat me down at the kitchen table and said, "Someone has to raise our son." Not we, someone, as if parenting was a job that could only be done by one person. She shook her head when I suggested help or daycare. "I will quit. You focus on your career. I will focus on him." I did not argue. I should have. But I did not. I thought it was temporary. A year, maybe 2, but a year became 5. And then Vanessa was born, and Diana never went back. She stopped sketching, stopped talking about buildings, and started talking about PTA meetings and country club memberships and why we needed a bigger house. She would use that choice as a weapon for the next 40 years. Every argument, every disagreement ended with, "I sacrificed my career for you. I gave up my dreams for this family you owe me." By 2010, both kids were gone. The house was empty, and I thought maybe Diana would go back to architecture. Instead, she spent $400 that year, spa treatments in Sedona, shopping trips to Paris, a 2-week Mediterranean cruise with her country club friends. I just paid the bills and wondered when she would run out of things to buy. 9 years later, I restructured the trust. When I reviewed the expense reports, I found it. $1, $2 million in jewelry purchases over 3 years. Cartier, Tiffany, Harry Winston. She had not told me about any of it, just used the cards tied to the trust and assumed I would not notice. I removed her name from the beneficiary list that week. She never knew, because she never read the legal documents I sent her. I opened my eyes and looked at the photo again. I loved the woman in this photo, but that woman disappeared decades ago. Tonight, I did not end a marriage. I just finally signed the acknowledgement that it had been over for years. The call came through while I was making breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast, the kind of simple meal I never had time for when I was working 80-hour weeks. It was just past 9 a.m. on Monday, and Manhattan was already alive with the sound of construction crews and delivery trucks. Samuel's name flashed on the screen. "Robert," he said. "Richard Ashford just called me. He is backing out. He wanted to know if Diana has any assets in her name." I told him the answer. 0, not a house, not a car, not a bank account. He thanked me and hung up. I leaned against the counter and smiled. So the knight in shining armor just realized his princess is broke. Over the next few days, Samuel kept me updated as they scrambled. Marcus walked into a temp agency on Fairfield Avenue and asked for a management position. The woman at the desk told him they had dishwasher openings at $14 an hour. Marcus, 34 years old, with no college degree and a blank work history, refused it. Vanessa went to a pawn shop and sold a Cartier bracelet and a diamond ring for $8,000. She was crying when she walked out, completely unaware she was technically fencing stolen property since it was bought with trust funds. Then came the final blow for Vanessa. Kyle Davidson, her husband, filed for divorce. Kyle was a real estate agent who measured his success by zip codes. Vanessa was an asset when she had money and connections. Now she was a liability. He emailed the divorce papers with a DocuSign request and blocked her number. I was reading the financial section when Vanessa called me. I answered, and the screaming started immediately. "This is your fault." She shrieked. "Kyle left me. He said I am an embarrassment, and it is all because of you." I let her yell for 10 seconds, then I hung up. Silence. That evening, Samuel sent me an audio file, 42 minutes long, recorded from the burner phone I had given Marcus 6 months ago. It still had location tracking and microphone access enabled. I plugged in my headphones. The first 20 minutes were useless. Marcus ordering drive-through food, Vanessa crying, and Amber, Marcus's girlfriend, reading job listings. Then the mood shifted. Amber's voice dropped to a whisper. What if we just went back? Back where? Marcus asked. To the house in Greenwich. Your dad is in Manhattan. Everything we need is still there. Jewelry, art, the safe in his office. Marcus breathed heavily. The security system. Cameras everywhere. He would know the second we stepped on the property. Amber laughed, a soft conspiratorial sound. Your dad keeps everything in that house, and the security code has not changed in 10 years. I know because I used to babysit your mom's jewelry box. 4729. It is your birth 7th, 1991. There was a long pause. If Dad won't give us what's ours, Marcus said slowly, we will take it. I stopped the recording. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. He was going to hand me the last piece I needed. I did not call Samuel. I did not send a warning. I just opened my laptop and checked the security system for the Greenwich house. Cameras active, motion sensors armed, silent alarm linked directly to my phone in the local precinct. If Marcus wanted to add breaking and entering to the list, I would not stop him. The alarm cut through the silence like a knife at 2:15 a.m. Security alert. Front door intrusion detected. I flipped my laptop open. The screen showed a grid of camera feeds from the Greenwich house. The motion sensors highlighted the front door feed in red. 2 figures, wearing dark hoodies and carrying flashlights, swept across the foyer. Marcus and Amber, they moved fast, heading straight for the office at the back of the house. The office where I kept the safe bolted to the floor, behind a sliding bookshelf. Marcus pushed the bookshelf open. The safe was a steel box with a digital combination lock glowing faint green. Marcus knelt, his hands shaking as he punched in numbers. The lock beeped once. Red light, wrong code. He tried again. Amber leaned over his shoulder. Try your birthday. Marcus typed in 040791. The lock beeped 3 times. Red light. Still wrong. Amber pulled a hammer from her bag. We don't need the code. Just break the damn thing open. That was when I picked up my phone and dialed 911. 911, what is your emergency? This is Robert Harrison. I am calling to report a break-in at my property in Greenwich. 2 intruders are currently in the home office, attempting to breach a safe. I am monitoring them via security cameras. Are the intruders armed, sir? They have tools, a flashlight and a hammer. Units are on the way. Stay on the line, Mr. Harrison. On the screen, Marcus swung the hammer at the safe's keypad. The first hit did nothing. The second cracked the plastic casing. The third shatters it completely. And sparks flew. Amber jumped back, and Marcus dropped the hammer, shaking his hand like he had been shocked. He had been. I installed the safe with a secondary defense system, a low-voltage charge that activates if the keypad is damaged. Not dangerous, just enough to sting. Before he could take another swing, the front door camera flashed blue and red. Sirens, the police were here. Marcus froze. Amber dropped her flashlight and ran for the back door. Marcus followed, clumsy, tripping over the edge of the rug. By the time he reached the back door, officers were already there, guns drawn, voices loud and commanding. I watched as Marcus and Amber were turned around, hands secured behind their backs, and led out toward the driveway. Mr. Harrison, the dispatcher said, officers have secured the scene. Do you want to press charges? Absolutely, I said without hesitation. Maximum penalty. I want them prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. My phone rang just before 4 a.m. It was the county jail. I answered, and Marcus's voice came through, cracked and desperate. Dad, I am sorry, I didn't mean. You broke into my home, I cut him off. You tried to take something that does not belong to you. That is not a mistake, Marcus. That is a felony. I hung up and blocked the number by 8:00 a.m. Amber's lawyer released a statement. She was coerced, she was cooperating with authorities, and she was filing for a restraining order against Marcus. The charges against Marcus were laid out in black and white. Residential burglary, Class B felony. Attempted grand larceny, Class D felony, bail set at $50. Diana posted it, borrowing the money from a friend. Samuel called me just after 6 p.m. It is done. Marcus has a felony arrest on his record. Even if he pleads down, the trust terms are clear. Any beneficiary convicted of a felony is automatically disqualified from future distributions. I leaned back in my chair, one down. 3 weeks later, I found myself standing in the Hartford Public Library on a Saturday morning, surrounded by the smell of old paper and polished wood. I was running my finger along a row of spines in the architecture section when I heard a voice behind me. "If you're after Brunelleschi, you will want the third shelf down." I turned and there she was, a woman about my age, wearing jeans and a Yale sweatshirt, holding a book I recognized immediately, Brunelleschi's Dome. Her hair was silver gray, pulled back in a loose ponytail, and her eyes were sharp. "I was just browsing," I said, which was a lie. She smiled knowingly. "You're browsing in the architecture section on a Saturday morning." "That is not browsing, that is research." I laughed and it surprised me. It had been weeks since I laughed at anything. Guilty. I am trying to remember why I used to love this stuff. We spent the next 20 minutes debating whether the real genius was the double shell design or the herringbone brickwork pattern. Her name was Elena Winters. She taught art history at Yale. We ended up at a coffee shop 2 blocks away, drinking black Americanos. She didn't waste time with small talk. "So, what brings a man in a $3,000 suit to a public library on a Saturday morning?" I looked at her, and something made me want to tell the truth. "I am hiding from my old life." She didn't flinch. "Divorce. You have that look, like you just stepped out of a building that was on fire, and you're not sure if you are relieved or terrified." She took a sip of her coffee. "Sometimes the hardest thing is realizing you've been invisible in your own marriage. That the person who was supposed to see you stopped looking a long time ago." I stared at her, and for the first time in 20 years, I felt like someone understood. By the afternoon, we were at Lime Rock Park for a classic car show. I was walking past a row of Corvettes when I saw it. A 1971 Porsche 911 Targa, British racing green, the paint so deep it looked like liquid. I stopped in my tracks. "You okay?" Elena asked. "I wanted to buy this car in 1998, I said quietly. Exact model, exact color. I was at the dealership, checkbook in hand, and Diana told me it was a midlife crisis. She said we didn't need another car. I left without it." Elena stepped closer. "What is stopping you now?" I didn't answer. I just walked up to the owner and asked the price, $180. I pulled out my phone and transferred the money before I could talk myself out of it. An hour later, I was also the owner of a Leica camera, a Rolex Submariner, and a custom leather jacket. Elena watched me buy all of it, then shook her head and laughed. "You are not hiding from your old life anymore. You are building a new one." By evening, we were driving down the Connecticut coast, the Porsche's top down, the wind whipping through Elena's hair. For the first time in decades, I was not driving to an obligation I resented. I felt freedom. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. A text from Samuel. "Diana just retained Arthur Jameson. Trial starts in 6 weeks. I glanced at the screen, then at Elena. She rested her hand on mine. "Whatever is coming," she said, "you are not facing it alone." I nodded and let the phone sit there unanswered. The war was coming, I knew that. But tonight, I was not thinking about courtrooms. Let the war begin. The invitation arrived on a Thursday afternoon. Cream-colored cardstock with embossed gold lettering. Fairmont Country Club Annual Charity Gala, Saturday evening, black tie. I held it up to the light, and I could almost see Diana's fingerprints on it, even though she did not send it. The club did, the same club where she had been an honorary member for the last 6 years, ever since I wrote them a check for $500,000 to renovate the East Wing. Her friends Eleanor, Margaret, and Patricia still met there every Tuesday for lunch. Tomorrow night, they would all be there, pretending they did not know that Diana was living in a motel. I RSVP'd for 2 Saturday evening. I was standing in front of the mirror in my penthouse adjusting my bow tie when Elena walked out of the bedroom. She wore a black dress that was simple and elegant, the kind that did not need jewelry to make a statement. "You sure about this?" she asked. "Absolutely," I said. We arrived fashionably late, the parking lot already full of Teslas and vintage Bentleys. A valet took the Porsche, and we walked through the front doors into a ballroom I knew better than my own living room. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, a string quartet playing Vivaldi. Everywhere were people I used to call friends, all of them turning to look as Elena and I stepped inside. The whispers started immediately. I heard fragments as we passed, that is, Robert Harrison. With someone new, "Diana is not here. Did you hear about the divorce papers?" I did not slow down. I walked to the bar, ordered 2 glasses of champagne, and handed one to Elena. We stood there letting them stare, letting them wonder. By 8:15 p.m., the speeches started. Richard Beaumont, the club president, stepped up to the microphone and talked about the scholarship fund. Then he invited the major donors to come forward to be recognized. A few people stood, walking toward the stage with practiced humility. I waited until they were all up there, clustered around Richard like a photo op, and then I set my glass down and walked forward. I did not wait for an invitation. I stepped onto the stage. Richard's face flickered with confusion before he recovered and handed me the microphone. "Good evening," I said, and the room went quiet. "Many of you know me as the man whose wife filed for divorce at our anniversary party a month ago." There was a ripple of nervous laughter, a few gasps, but I kept going. "Tonight, I would like to announce a donation to the Fairmont Scholarship Fund. The amount is, let's call it symbolic." I reached into my jacket, pulled out an envelope, and handed it to Richard. He opened it slowly, his fingers fumbling. When he pulled out the check, his face went pale. He stared at it for a long moment, then looked at me, then back at the check. $6.8 million, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, and then louder into the microphone. $6.8 million. The room erupted. People stood, applauding, some of them shouting. I just nodded once and stepped off the stage. Alina was waiting for me at the bar. She handed me my champagne without saying a word. At a table near the front, I saw Eleanor, Margaret, and Patricia. They were not clapping. They were sitting there, frozen, their faces pale. I lifted my glass in their direction. The gala was live-streamed on the club's website. I knew that somewhere miles away, Diana was watching. At the Riverview Motor Lodge, Diana sat on the edge of a bed that sagged in the middle, holding Vanessa's phone. She watched me stand on that stage. She saw the number $6.8 million, the exact amount they owed the trust. "He just gave away everything we could have fought for," Vanessa whispered. No, Diana's voice shook with rage. "He gave away our money to humiliate me." In the corner, Marcus slammed his fist into the wall, leaving a jagged hole. The motel manager knocked on the door 10 minutes later, telling them the damage would cost $200. Marcus did not have $200. None of them did. Diana picked up her phone and dialed her lawyer, Arthur Jameson. "Mr. Jameson, I need you to destroy my husband, whatever it takes." Samuel arrived at my penthouse at 9 a.m. on Sunday, carrying 4 cardboard boxes stacked so high I could barely see his face. "Jameson filed his motion," Samuel said, brushing dust off his sleeves. "Motion for forensic discovery. He is accusing you of hiding assets in offshore accounts and shell companies. Wants 10 years of financial records. Hearing set for Tuesday morning." I looked at the boxes, and this is our response. Every receipt, every statement, every transaction for the last 12 years. If he wants transparency, we will bury him in it. We spent the day at the dining table, organizing spreadsheets. Diana, $287 million over 12 years. Fashion, $16 million. Jewelry, $980. Spa and wellness, $710. Marcus, $1953 million on failed startups and car leases. Vanessa, $47 million on content creation equipment and travel. Total spending, $287 million. The reasonable limit under the trust terms was $6 million. The excess spending with interest totaled $6.8 million. "We file a counterclaim for breach of fiduciary duty," Samuel said. "They are not plaintiffs, they are debtors." Tuesday morning, New Haven Superior Court. Family Division. I sat at the defendant's table with Samuel. Across the aisle, Diana sat with Jameson in her cream Chanel suit. Marcus and Vanessa were in the gallery, looking miserable. Judge Karen Holloway entered, a woman with sharp eyes and a reputation for impatience. Jameson launched into his opening statement. "Your Honor, this is a case about power and control. Robert Harrison used his wealth as a weapon to isolate his wife for 45 years. Diana Harrison sacrificed her career to raise their children. Now he hides behind legal structures designed to keep her in the dark." When Samuel rose, his opening was 2 sentences long. "Your Honor, we have 12 years of expense reports. Mrs. Harrison didn't sacrifice, she spent." Samuel handed a USB drive to the clerk. Within seconds, spreadsheets filled the courtroom monitor. Categories, amounts, dates, a relentless cascade of spending. Judge Holloway leaned forward, squinting at the monitor. "Counselor," the judge said, looking at Jameson, "are you aware that your client spent $520,000 on cosmetic procedures over the last 12 years? Jameson's confusion flickered. "Your Honor, I was not fully briefed on the specifics. You filed a motion accusing Mr. Harrison of hiding assets, and you didn't bother to review the expenditure history your client signed off on every month for over a decade," Judge Holloway said, her voice sharp. Jameson sat down in defeat. Judge Holloway looked at Samuel. Motion for forensic accounting is denied. This court is not the appropriate venue for debt collection, but the trust structure appears legally sound. We are adjourned. Outside, Samuel checked his phone. Diana called my office an hour ago. Asked for your address to apologize. She wants to meet. I thought about it. Give her the address. Tomorrow night, 9:30. That evening, I returned to my apartment. I poured a glass of Macallan and waited. At 9:28 p.m., the security camera in the lobby showed 3 figures. Diana, Marcus, and Vanessa. Diana held a bouquet of red roses wrapped in cellophane. I opened the door. They walked through the foyer and stopped, taking in the 14-foot ceilings, the Calcutta marble floors, the sweeping view of the Hudson River. Sit down, I said. They moved to the white Italian leather sofa. Diana set the roses on the glass coffee table. Samuel emerged from the kitchen, carrying a leather portfolio. Marcus spoke first. Dad, I am sorry. For the break-in, for everything. You were right about the money. I wasted it. Vanessa nodded. Me too. I wasn't grateful. I should have been. Diana took a breath. Robert, I owe you an apology. I have been unfair. I want to make things right. I let the silence stretch for 5 seconds. You're not here because you are sorry. You are here because Jameson told you this would play well in court tomorrow. Diana's face went pale. That's not true. Then why did you ask Samuel for my address 90 minutes after the judge adjourned? Why the rehearsed tears? I turned to Marcus. Did Jameson coach you? Marcus hesitated, then nodded slowly. He said if we came here and apologized, it would show the judge you were unreasonable if you refused to reconcile. I didn't want to, but Mom insisted. You came here with a script. I said sit down. I gestured to Samuel. He opened the portfolio, pulled out a remote, and pressed a button. The television lit up with the spreadsheet, 12 years of expenses. Samuel read the totals aloud. The $2 million excess, the $8 million debt. Every month, Samuel mailed account statements to the Greenwich house. I said, you received 144 statements over 12 years. You didn't open a single one. You should have told me. Diana's voice was sharp. I told you in 2019 when I restructured the trust. You laughed and said I was being paranoid. I stood and walked to the window. You spent 12 years treating my work as an ATM, and now you're sitting in my home, holding roses you probably charged to a card I am still paying off, pretending you have had an epiphany. Samuel pulled 3 contracts from the portfolio and set them on the table. You have 2 choices, Samuel said. Option 1, sign the Legacy Redemption Program contract and begin employment tomorrow morning. Option 2, walk out and wait for a separate civil lawsuit. That lawsuit will result in wage garnishment, asset seizure, and bankruptcy. Diana's voice rose. This is slavery. Slavery is involuntary, I said. This is a choice. You can walk out right now and take your chances in court. Or you can sign and start rebuilding. What kind of jobs? Vanessa asked, her voice small. Samuel opened the contracts. Mrs. Diana Harrison, Retail Warehouse Associate, BJ's Wholesale Club. $15.50 per hour. Mrs. Vanessa Harrison, Call Center Representative, Concentrix. $16 per hour. Mr. Marcus Harrison, Line Cook, Olive Garden. $17 per hour. 15% of your gross wages will be garnished and applied to the debt. For how long? Marcus looked up. Complete 24 months of continuous employment, and 50% of the debt will be forgiven. Complete 60 months, and the entire debt is canceled. At that point, you will be eligible for reinstatement as trust beneficiaries. Diana laughed bitterly. 5 years? Or bankruptcy, Samuel said. Your choice. I sat back down. I am not doing this because I hate you. I am doing this because you need to feel the weight of the full debt. You need to earn your way back. Marcus picked up a pen. His hand shook as he signed. He looked at me. You were right, Dad. About all of it. Vanessa signed next, tears running down her cheeks. Diana stared at the contract for a full minute. Finally, she picked up the pen and scrawled her signature. Your first shifts start at 8 tomorrow morning, Samuel said. Don't be late. They walked to the door in silence. I watched them step into the elevator. Samuel joined me at the window. This isn't revenge, I said. It is an honest reckoning. The next morning at the courthouse, Arthur Jameson walked in holding a single folder. He stood at the plaintiff's table and spoke to the judge. Your Honor, I move to withdraw as counsel for the plaintiff. Ethical conflict. My client signed a binding employment contract with the defendant last night, without consulting me. I cannot continue to represent her. Judge Holloway turned to Diana. Mrs. Harrison, did you read the contract before signing? Yes, Diana said softly. Mr. Jameson, your motion is granted. You are dismissed. The lawyer walked out, leaving Diana alone. Without her lawyer, Diana's case crumbled. She presented unorganized photocopies. Judge Holloway quickly ruled against her. The marriage was dissolved. All marital assets remained in the trust pursuant to the prenuptial agreement. And the court acknowledged the $6.8 million debt owed by the plaintiffs. The gavel fell. Samuel and I walked out of the courtroom. Diana slipped out through the rear exit. I stood on the courthouse steps where, 46 years ago, Diana and I had taken our wedding photos. I wondered when that girl had disappeared, or if she had ever really existed. That evening, I opened the door to my apartment. The smell of garlic and basil filled the air. Elena stood at the stove, stirring pen alla arrabbiata. She handed me a glass of wine. "To chapter 2, she said. I clinked my glass against hers. "To chapter 2. At 11. My phone buzzed, a text from Samuel. "We have a problem. Ethics complaint filed this evening. Press inquiry from the Hartford Courant. Call me first thing tomorrow." The war was not over yet. The next morning, Samuel pieced together the timeline. It was a story of 3 people who had spent 3 months working, calculating, and realizing they would never escape the hole they had dug. Marcus had stood in front of a commercial gas range at 5:30 in the morning, flames roaring beneath 6 pans. Sweat dripped from his forehead. His left hand throbbed from the 3rd burn that week. He had lost 35 pounds. During his 10-minute break, he opened the calculator app on his phone. He did the math for the 100th time. 3 months of garnishment totaled $1.368 toward a debt of $6. $8 million. He did the division. It would take him 242 years to pay it off. He knew the contract said 50% forgiven after 24 months, 100% after 60 months. But sitting in that locker room, the debt felt real, and the forgiveness felt like a promise his father would never keep. Vanessa had sat in a cubicle at Concentrix, her headset digging into her ears. 8 hours of people yelling about cable bills had worn her down. On her break, she saw an Instagram story from an old influencer friend posting from the Maldives. Vanessa did the math. She would be 523 years old before her debt was paid off. Diana had hoisted a 40-pound box of canned goods onto a shelf at BJ's Wholesale Club. Her knees cracked, pain shot through her leg. In the break room, she saw a magazine article about me and Elena finding peace in Tuscany. Diana realized she would be 527 years old before her debt was cleared. She thought it was cruelty. They met at the motel that night. Marcus brought a laptop from the public library. "We will be dead before we are halfway through this debt," Marcus said. "He designed it to break us. What if we quit?" Vanessa asked. "If we miss 3 pay periods, he files a civil suit and we lose everything," Diana replied. "Then we make him quit," Marcus leaned forward. "We file an ethics complaint. We go to the press. We make him the villain." They drafted an email to the Connecticut Bar Association, alleging elder abuse and coercion. Diana called a reporter at the Hartford Courant, claiming a millionaire forced his 64-year-old ex-wife into manual labor to repay a $7 million debt. When Samuel arrived at my apartment the next morning, the article was already online. The headline read, "Greenwich millionaire forces ex-wife, 64, into warehouse job to repay $7 million debt." It had been shared 12,000 times. Social media was full of hashtags like elder abuse. "Do we have recordings of the apartment meeting?" I asked Samuel. Samuel nodded. "Your home security system captured audio and video." The footage was clear. It showed Samuel explaining the contract, Diana refusing to consult a lawyer, and all 3 of them signing voluntarily. No threats, no coercion. Furthermore, Diana had passed a pre-employment physical. She was perfectly healthy and had even been promoted to supervisor at the warehouse. "Send the recording to the Bar Association," I ordered. "Send the contract, with the debt forgiveness clauses highlighted. Send Diana's medical records and her promotion letter. Call our PR firm. I want a statement ready by noon." My statement went live that afternoon. Diana Harrison and her adult children are not victims. They are debtors who spent $73 million in trust funds. They signed the contract voluntarily after declining independent counsel. They are attempting to manipulate public sympathy to escape their legal obligations. The video and the contract were attached. By the next morning, the Hartford Courant published a follow-up. The social media tide shifted instantly. The ethics complaint was dismissed. A week later, Samuel called me in Tuscany. "They are not backing down." Marcus hired a private investigator to run a background check on Elena. "They are looking for leverage. Let them dig," I said, watching the sunset over the vineyards. Elena's record as a tenured professor is spotless. The next day, Samuel emailed me with the subject line, "Game over." Marcus had accidentally forwarded the private investigator's report to the Hartford Courant reporter instead of to Diana. The report found absolutely nothing on Elena, but the real problem was how Marcus paid for it. He used a check from a bank account he opened using Diana's social security number. It was identity theft. The Hartford Police Department opened a case. They had completely buried themselves. Months passed. It was 7:30 in the morning, and I sat on the stone terrace of the villa in Montalcino, a cup of espresso cooling in my hand. The hills stretched before me, rows of grapevines turning gold in the October light. My laptop was open. An email from Samuel waited on the screen. Monthly report, Legacy Redemption Program. Month 5. Robert, all 3 participants remain in compliance. No missed shifts in 5 months. Performance reviews attached. I scrolled down. Marcus James Harrison, line cook, Olive Garden, promoted to $21 an hour. 0 absences. His manager recommended him for the sous chef training program, noting his exceptional reliability and willingness to learn. He bought a used bicycle to commute and save bus fare. Vanessa Claire Harrison, call center representative, customer satisfaction score 93%. She had enrolled in an evening accounting course at the community college, paying tuition through a wage deduction plan. Diana Catherine Harrison, stock supervisor, BJ's Wholesale, promoted to assistant manager trainee. She organized a fundraiser to help a coworker pay for her daughter's emergency dental surgery, contributing $50 from her own wages. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair. 5 months ago, Marcus had broken into my house with a hammer. Now he was training to be a chef. Vanessa had spent $380,000 on camera equipment she never used. Now she was studying accounting. Diana had claimed I destroyed her life. Now she was helping a coworker pay medical bills. I picked up my phone and typed a reply to Samuel. Continue monthly reports, no changes to contract terms. If they complete 60 months, I will reinstate their beneficiary status. At 9:30 a.m., Elena and I climbed into the Porsche. The morning air was cool. The engine rumbled to life. We drove south, threading between rows of Brunello vines. We pulled over at a viewpoint overlooking the Orsia Valley. I reached into my wallet and pulled out that old wedding photograph from 1980. Diana in a borrowed white dress, me in a rented suit. I folded it carefully and slipped it into the back pocket of my wallet. Elena reached over and took my hand. When we returned to the villa, I told Elena about the report. They are becoming the people you hoped they would be. She smiled. I didn't hope for anything. I shook my head. I just gave them a choice, and they chose to try. Do you think they will finish the 5 years? I don't know, I said. But for the first time in 45 years, what they do isn't my responsibility anymore. That evening, we sat on the terrace with 2 glasses of Brunello di Montalcino. The sky shifted from orange to violet. For 45 years, I was someone's husband, someone's father, someone's ATM. Now, I was just Robert. I didn't destroy them. I freed them. And I freed myself. If you followed my journey to the end, I want you to understand something. This isn't just a story of revenge, where a father strikes back at ungrateful children. It is a family story about what happens when love becomes enabling and silence becomes complicity. I spent 45 years building wealth, but I never taught my family the difference between earning and entitlement. I gave them everything, and in doing so, I gave them nothing. Looking back, I see where I went wrong. I should have said no more often. I should have let them struggle earlier when the stakes were smaller. Instead, I waited until the damage was catastrophic, and my financial retaliation became the only language they understood. Don't be like me. Don't wait until your children are 34 years old to teach them accountability. Don't mistake silence for peace or spending for love. Teach your children early, set boundaries, and when they fail, let them feel it while you are still there to catch them. If this resonated with you, please leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Hit that subscribe button and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Your support means everything. Thank you for staying until the end. One last thought. Freedom isn't something you give. It is something you earn.